Hello, critical thinkers. Hope all is well. So, some housekeeping for tonight. Be sure everyone to like, comment, subscribe, share the video with other individuals. That would be greatly appreciated. Um, if you can do if you can do me a favor and put down the city and state that you're watching from, that would be greatly appreciated. I love to see where people are watching from, whether they're watching from upstate New York or whether they're in a different country. We have some people from the UK, some people from Australia watching. So it's very cool to know where people are watching and engaging from. So already have a couple comments in the chat. We have James saying no body cam, no job. We got Al, Razak saying at James Word. Al saying Brooklyn in the building. That's great. Brooklyn's in the building. Uh, I was born and raised in Brooklyn myself originally. For those of you who don't know, the Kensington area was not too far away from Flatbush Avenue. So if anybody from Brooklyn's in the house, please let me know. Appreciate that. We got James from Wisconsin. Wisconsin is in the house. Welcome, James. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. We got Run and L8 from Buffalo, New York. Hello from Buffalo. We got Keisha Wong. How are you? Hopefully, all is well with you from Rochester, New York. And Keisha, if you want to come on later, you have an open invitation to come on and chit chat. Okay. We got Clifton Ketchum from Norwich, New York, between Bingham, New York, and Utica, New York. Welcome, Clifton. Thank you for being here. James with the hands, appreciate that tremendously. Appreciate that. So, just in terms of getting up, sorry, we got Devontae Harrison from Clayton, North Carolina. Clayton, North Carolina. Devontae, thank you for being here. Again, just to do some of the whole marketing YouTube stuff because YouTube doesn't really support this type of content. If everyone can do me a favor right now, please like the live stream. That would be greatly appreciated. Please comment in the chat, even if you just put the city or state where you're from. It helps with the algorithm. Please share this. Please share this video with others. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. All that really greatly helps. It allows us to produce more content for everyone here today. So thank you. For everyone who's on, thank you for supporting the channel. Some of you super chat, some of you do cash apps. By the way, the Cash App information is below. If you want to send a Cash App directly to our guest today, who's Sean Chung, his Cash App is also listed below. Greatly appreciated that as well. The first thing I want to do is really talk about why we are here tonight. I first learned about Sean Chung not last week when I had him on the chat. We had a conversation about his experience in solitary. I first learned about Sean by way of, and I'm going to pull up a video that I did here. So Sean was featured. He was referenced in an article by JB Nicholas in the Freelance News. So the Freelance News did this amazing article that featured the nurses involved, the nurses who worked in the Marcy Infirmary. And JB Nicholas had interviewed Sean Chung because he had firsthand knowledge and experience as an incarcerated individual working in that infirmary. So, needless to say, I would not expect that a couple months later that I actually would have Sean Chung on the show. And so there's a lot of things that Sean has to say. Last Sunday's live stream, we really scratched the surface on his experience, but I wanted today for us to focus on Marcy Correctional per se. So for those of you who don't know, back in December, Robert Brooks, who was incarcerated at a Mohawk Correctional Facility, was transferred over to Marcy Correctional. And during that transfer, he was beaten 3 times, as indicated by the Onondaga County District Attorney, William Fitzpatrick. The beating that we saw on camera was beating number 3, right? That infirmary is an infamous dungeon that I've done numerous stories on, and there are many incarcerated individuals who have spoken about various beatdowns that they've had in that infirmary or in Marcy Correctional by the beat up squad. So it's very important that we hear Sean today. We hear his story. We hear what happened in that infirmary firsthand. For those of you who might have seen a couple of TikToks that I've done, I've mentioned that the mainstream media is really not covering this more specifically, right? They're not going in detail about the atrocities that's occurring all throughout the New York State prison system. There's widespread and systematic abuses of incarcerated individuals. If we were to see what we saw occurring to incarcerated individuals, let's say somebody gets pulled over and cops pull someone over, there would be protests, there would be civil unrest in the streets, knowing that there was no justice. And for many and hundreds and thousands of those people who are incarcerated who get beaten, some are on a daily basis. This is occurring, and unfortunately, there's no consequences for these correctional officers that are doing these beatings. So this is systematic. So in order for this to occur, you have to have silence and you have to have cooperation from various entities. You have cooperation from the police union, NYSCOBA, who defends these officers who beat and murder incarcerated individuals. You have superintendents, you have the commissioner of docks, you have district attorneys, all of whom refuse to prosecute these correction officers. Marcy is not that much different from other correctional facilities. Marcy has a higher level of brutality compared to some other facilities. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up Sean. Okay. I'm going to bring him up and I'm going to ask everyone here one thing. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves in the chat. Feel free to talk about your experiences. Many of you have not been incarcerated yourself, but you have family members who are incarcerated, and you hear their stories. They talk to you several times a week, or even per day. They communicate what they're going through and the brutality of these correctional officers. Okay, I will say some of what Sean is going to be speaking about today. It's sensitive. It's it's content that if you have experienced this yourself, it may trigger you, it may bring back memories. And unfortunately, a lot of people who watch my videos comment and speak about how this, triggers their trauma. Okay. So I will say that, views are important to some extent, that mental health is more important than views. So if you are triggered by hearing these stories, hearing about brutality, this may not be the right live stream for you. No harm, no foul. So what I'm going to do now is bring up Sean and go over all of the allegations he made reference to in the article in the Freelance, and also he was featured in another article called The Gothamist. So I'm gonna pull him up now. Let's bring him up. Sean, can you hear me?
Yes, how you doing?
Okay, I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Good to see you again.
Very nice to see you as well. Very nice to see you. So, um, so last week we spoke about the brutality in other correctional facilities, and you had mentioned that you had been in 10 to 11 different correctional facilities, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So maybe talk to us about the time frame of when you were at Marcy and how you ended up working in the infirmary. But actually, the thing you should do before that is actually just tell people who you are, because some people may not have been here last week and heard you speak. And for those of you who are seeing Sean for the first time, you after this live stream, you have to go back and hear him speak last week. Last week, I had Keisha Wong on, who's the mother of an incarcerated individual in Attica, and her story was powerful. And Keisha, if you want to come on later, I'd love to have you back on, and maybe we can have a conversation to learn more about what's occurring in your case. So, and also Sean spoke about, and he really broke down what solitary confinement is, what it's not. He he broke down what's on paper, what's policy, and what actually happened. So, Sean, if you can just do me a favor, say who you are, your background, and then maybe go into when you were at Marcy Correctional and how you ended up actually working in the infirmary.
All right, so I'm Chung. I work for the Fortune Society. I am currently a peer specialist, and I do cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm also a group facilitator over Zoom for anger management for people that are formerly incarcerated and are court appointed and court mandated to attend anger management sessions. So I host 10-week anger management sessions. I also do guest hosts and guest lecturing for criminal justice reform. I'm a certified paralegal. I have over 5 years of legal experience doing that. And I've been doing pro se motions for incarcerated individuals for over 5 years. I've worked with the Osborne Association. I've worked with Parole Preparation Organization. And I've worked with other different organizations. And I've been featured in, like he said, The God the Mist and other news articles. And I have an article coming out probably next week with the New York Times as well. I'm also the class president of the John Jay Institute for Opportunity.
Great, great. And just a quick question before we talk about Marcy. For those people who don't know, what is cognitive behavioral therapy?
So cognitive behavioral therapy is basically reimagining your mind, your way of thinking. It's basically telling you how to help yourself, providing the tools to help you help yourself. I'm basically helping you reimagine your mindset from the start to finish, but I'm giving you the tools to do it on your own. That's basically cognitive behavioral therapy in a nutshell.
Right, great. So, Sean, so talk to us about what was the time frame that you were actually at Marcy Correctional, and how did you end up working in the infirmary?
So I ended up getting my classification dropped when I was in Attica Correctional Facility, and they transferred me over to Marcy Correctional Facility. That probably was about 2021 or 2022. I get the years mixed up a little bit, but it might have been 2021 or 2022. Upon intake, they let me off. I got off the draft bus and I ended up getting sent to my dorm, and they asked me, what do you want to do while you're here at this facility? You basically go to a place called program committee. Program committee usually pushes everybody into the mess hall. They say, you're going to be a cook, you're going to be serving lettuce, you're going to be serving rice, or you're going to cook the rice and the lettuce, or quick chill meals. Me, I said, I can't cook inside of the mess hall. I have certifications as a paralegal. I want to work either in the law library, or I want to do something where it'll actually be something I can do every day and stay busy. So if I can't take another program like working in the law library, then I'll take working in the infirmary, or I'll take a vocational job. And they're like, okay, well, we see here that you already have vocationals on your belt, under your belt. So we're going to end up giving you, the infirmary is actually open. People just got fired. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll take that. But I didn't want to do any lawns and grounds work because that's usually very, very hard work. And I didn't want to do any mess hall work because that was usually where all the problems were with officers. So I was like, all right, cool. Okay. I ended up going to program committee, and they made me a porter in the dorm, and then they ended up making me a porter in the infirmary.
Gotcha. So when you worked so you were a porter in the infirmary?
Yes.
Okay. And how often did you have to work in the infirmary? Was it, would you say once a week, once a day? How many hours did you put in?
It was daily. So I would come in.
Okay.
Sometimes it would be so you had AM, PM, evening, and late evening modules. I don't really know the time frames of them, but some of them is early in the morning, some of them are in the afternoon, some of them are in the evening, and some of them are in the late evening. So I would sometimes come in the PMs, and then a lot of workers would get fired for stealing. That was common. They would steal food, they would steal little items or steal little minor things, but I never would steal. I would always do my job and just leave and keep my head down. And a lot of other workers would gossip. They would politic with other incarcerated individuals about what was going on in there. Or officer would ask them a trick question to see if they would talk about what happens in the infirmary. And when word got back, they would be fired. But me, I always kept my head down and minding my business. So that's how I stayed along. And then they even put traps to see if I would steal anything or send me to rooms where things were laid out like food. And I never would steal. And one officer even put what's called loonies. We have a nickname called loonies, where you might find drugs in a finger of a glove tied up. And she left these little fingers on the floor. I don't know what was in them, but what I did was I scooped them up with my brush and my handheld scooper, and I brought it directly to her. And I was like, "Hey, miss, there's these little droppings, these little fingers all over the floor. I don't know what this is, but here you go." And she was like, "Oh, I see you found all my little traps." And I was like, "I don't get what you mean." And she's like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
left those to see if you would, take them. And I'm still gonna pat you down and see if you have anything else. But good job." And then from there, I was in.
So going back a second, you had mentioned that the correctional officers, they would set a trap, meaning they would ask you about the infirmary to kind of test you to see whether you
Yeah.
would talk about certain things. Could you talk to us about that again?
So, for example, let's say an alarm happened. We call it a red dot. When alarms happen, officers get in these vans, these big blue vans, and then they go report to a dorm, right? Let's say a guy got into a fight, and the next thing you know, the guy got beat up and he got dragged out of the van and dragged into the infirmary and got beat up. Some people would have to stay there and clean up, like me, for instance. I would have to stay there
Yeah.
and clean up their mess. And then they would send me back on my way to my dorm, and I would get back to my dorm. I probably would shower and start making food. And the officer might pull me to the side, like, "Hey, let me talk to you. What happened in the infirmary?" And I'll go, "Hey, I don't know. I mind my business. I just keep my head down." Like, "You sure you don't want to tell me? Matter of fact, you go tell one of your boys later. I'll just go ask one of them." I'm like, "Listen, I don't know what goes on in there. All I know is I'm here to do my job and go back to my dorm and go home. That's it." And my favorite line was, "There's only one person on my ID, and that's me." And
Yeah.
they would love that. And they would not bother me at all. And then from there, I would go back to work the next day, and the officer would be like, "I see you kept your mouth shut. I see you're not a rat." And then from there, they just did whatever they wanted around me.
Wow. So it kind of sounds as though, since they knew that you were not going to say anything, they felt emboldened to do what they wanted to do because you
Exactly.
wouldn't snitch, right?
Man.
Okay. So, going back to that article in the freelance, this is back in January. I believe I actually did a video on that article January 23rd, and the article came out January 22nd. And that article was a bombshell article because you made some very, very, very heavy allegations. Very heavy allegations. So I definitely want to ask you about those things because they're pretty big. They're pretty big. So one of the first things you said in that freelance article, and I'm gonna quote you. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, and I know you will. Okay. So this is the first quote, right? It said, you said that place was like a Nazi death camp.
Yes, that's true.
So that's a very strong statement. And some people would probably say, he's fucking exaggerating. So maybe talk to us about what that means and why you call that infirmary like a Nazi death camp.
Okay. So after an issue happens, or let's say an issue never even happened, you could be walking to breakfast during the AM module and you can see officers riding around in this big blue van, riding around, circling the little courtyard or whatever you want to call that driveway that's in the middle of the two walkways. So I call it a courtyard because it ends up being a horseshoe where you could ride around in a circle. And they jump out and they call it picking a herb. They jump out, point the finger, and say, "You asshole." And whoever turns around to you, they're gonna say, "We got one." And they're gonna handcuff you and they're gonna throw you inside the back of this van. They're gonna slide the door open as if they're kidnapping you, and they're gonna fling you in there head first, and you're gonna hear somebody fall like bowling pins, right? Then you're gonna see the
Hmm.
door slide closed, and then they're gonna drive off, and they're heading straight to the infirmary. And as we're walking to breakfast or walking back from breakfast, you can just hear the screams, right? So now this is the big difference. Everybody's going to say, we know you're going to work there. Please tell us what happened. Please tell us if this guy's okay. This is my friend from my neighborhood, or this is my childhood friend, or that's my cousin, or this is my family member, or whatever the person might be to whoever the person is, right? And I go, I'll see what I can do. So now when I'm walking down there, I'm dreading what I'm going to see because I'm walking with my head down and I can't do anything about this. So as soon as I get between these doors, they say, we got a fucking asshole in here. You didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything, right? And I don't even respond. I just look at them and I go grab my mop and go do my job. And the first thing they say is, he's not going to say anything. Don't pay the asshole any mind. So now when you get into the infirmary now, they have these quarantine rooms. And it's a little glass that you can look inside of each room and you can see what happened to these guys. Some of them are still in there. And it's unimaginable the things that I had to see. You wouldn't even believe the things that I saw in there. And then these guys just disappear the next day because they take them to something called the small chute. And nobody is allowed to go in there. Now we have something called they call it inmate representatives, where you can basically become the guy's lawyer if he requests you, but only if you work in the law library. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of people deny that, because if you try to represent a guy that they don't like, they're going to threaten you and they're going to set you up. And I probably was one of the only people that used to agree to certain things like that. I will go above and beyond. So now when you get into these places like the infirmary, you have a nurse like the one you showed on the video. Her name is Nurse Matos, by the way. I never forgot her name. I memorized her name. So when I came home, I'll be able to bring awareness to that. She was one of the people that fostered the culture. She was one of the people that would say, officer, I want you to write this guy up immediately. This guy, I want him beat to death. And when you beat his ass, make sure that I'm there so I can whoop his ass too. And this is exactly how she used to talk.
Wow.
This is exactly how she used to talk.
So going back to the horseshoe thing, you're saying that you had officers in vans, and are these officers, quote unquote, part of the CERT team, the CERT CERT?
So one thing I'll tell you is a lot of them don't wear name tags. A lot of them don't wear the CERT team jackets. A lot of them, you don't even know their names unless you have been in that facility for a long time or you've got a misbehavior report. I only started knowing their names because I was in that jail for 2 years and I worked in almost every part of that facility. I worked in the law library, I worked in the infirmary, I worked in the school building, and I worked in the dorm. And then my boss was the union rep. So a lot of them came and talked to her when I worked in the law library. So I knew all the in-house gossip from the infirmary, where all of the demon squad people hung out at, and the law library, where all of the cool guys / assholes, that's what we called them, or dickheads, hung out. So I knew all the insider stuff.
So you're saying that these officers would drive around and they would just pick a, quote unquote, pick a herb, pick out somebody unprovoked, and just scoop them up and beat them?
Yeah. So my first day in Marcy, I had this same exact hairstyle. And you know what they said to me? They surrounded me and said, that's an illegal hairstyle. And I was like, this is not a legal hairstyle. By law, there's something called the Crown Act. I'm allowed to wear this. Then there was a memorandum passed around from Attica that said it's legal now for us to wear our hair however we want. And they said, oh, we got a tough guy. You know what today is? Do you know where you're at? I said, I don't know what today is. All I know is today is Sunday. And I do know where I'm at. I'm in Marcy. They said, all right, go ahead, tough guy. And I'm not a tough guy. And I just walked away. I went to go eat breakfast and I was stopped by another officer. Her name was Miss Hunt. And she goes, oh my God, they're going to kill you. I said, what do you mean? She said, that hairstyle, that's an illegal hairstyle. I'm like, this is a legal hairstyle. I'll just go take it back out since this is going to be a problem. This is my first day in the facility. I'll never forget this. So I walk out now. All I hear is, and they jump out. Like 7 of them jump out of this van and surround me. And they go, today is CO Sunday. And this is when I first seen the black gloves with the bars on them, because they said just exactly like this and put the black gloves on. And I stood my ground. I said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going anywhere with you guys. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to take these out of my hair. You don't even have to worry about it because I'm not going to ever see any of you ever again. I won't be going to any, we call it chows when you go to eat in the mess hall. I won't be going on any chow runs. And there was this one guy, he just kept playing with his gloves. He was itching to do it. And then I ended up making it back to my dome. And everybody that was walking with me on the mess hall run said, bro, please, bro, you just got here. We like you, bro. Please just take your hair out. And if you look at my IDs, I had a ponytail my whole time in that facility. I never braided my hair again. You know why? Because people used to see braids on the walkway. They would rip your braids out of your head. I never braided my hair ever again. Ever again. And then they used to call me the guy with the stupid haircut because I had the ponytail. And they used to walk around with clippers. I'm actually very angry right now because this is opening up a treasure chest that I buried years ago. So they would walk around with clippers, and if you weren't a person that stood your ground or had family support, they would shave your head. They mostly did it to the little white boys because they wouldn't defend themselves, and they knew they could bully them, and they didn't have a lot of family support. And they used to really abuse the LGBTQ people. Way worse than anybody else because they felt like nobody really cared about them. But that's where they were wrong. When I got into Lower Library, after I stopped working in an infirmary, I made it a point of my life to help everybody. And they used to say that this guy is helping everybody. And they used to threaten me, especially the one that put the rag in Robert Brooks's mouth. He pulled out a weapon in the hallway of Lower Library and said, this is going to be yours if you keep doing what you're doing. And I stood my ground. I said, listen, I got a job to do just like you got a job to do. You guys hired me to do a job, and my job is helping people file motions, file briefs, draft up whatever they want done. So if you don't want me working here, tell my boss right there to fire me. And she came out. Her name is Miss Main. She came out and said to him, why are you bothering my worker? This is his job. He's not doing anything wrong. And from there, it just became a constant problem where they found little ways to harass me. The main thing I used to see with Marcy was people with addictions, they would have medication. It's called the MAT program. They have a substance abuse or substance use program to help people with prior addictions. So if you were a person that did heroin or fentanyl or whatever your drug of choice was, they gave you what's called Suboxone. The nickname that we called it was Chinita. It was little orange squares. It was little squares, probably 8 milligram, 10 milligram squares, and it helped you erase your drug addiction or block it. It blocked, I guess, the neurons in your brain from dealing with the substance addiction. And a lot of people used to appear high because that was a different coping mechanism. So if they thought that they were high, they would beat them to a pulp in the bathroom. In the bathroom, they have these stalls where the upper part of your body shows because you're supposed to be visible. So a lot of people would attempt suicide or have overdoses in the bathroom. So they wanted to be able to have easy access to view you. But some people would feel like I'm vulnerable to the next person walking by, a passerby looking in here while I have my pants down using the bathroom. So what we used to do was we used to take towels and create curtains, and we would just hang the curtain up, and an officer would walk by and say, hey, are you alive in there? Yes, I'm using the bathroom. I just have my curtain up. People like, okay, just take your curtain down when you're done. Don't leave it up when the sergeant walks. But you will have certain officers that went above and beyond from what their norm was with their job requirements and get in these vans and drive past the dorm slow and see the towels up from the window and say, okay, people probably using drugs or doing something illegal in there. And they would rush in and burst open on the doors. And the people that appeared high, or if somebody smoked prior to somebody else being in there and they smelled the smoke, they would beat you to a pulp, handcuff you, and take you out and tell you to admit to being high so they could be justified. And then when you get this tier 2 or tier 1 ticket, you go to this hearing where they had a lieutenant named McGuire that made it his thing to specifically try people with substance users and beat them, have to a pulp and send them back to the dorm black and blue. And he had a thing where if you had tobacco on you when you went down to the hearing, he would take the tobacco, crush it up, and stuff it down your throat and tell you, if you can't eat this tobacco, you're not leaving. You're not leaving. And that was just one of the things. One of the things. And then they used to put you on the wall in the infirmary and bend you in ways that I didn't even know your body could bend. Human pretzels. And they would tell you, if you get off this wall, we're going to kill you. Now imagine 10, 20 guys beating you to a pulp and you have to stay on the wall. And then when you fall off the wall, they drag you to the quarantine room. And once that door closes, it's muffled screams you could hear. And then they're dumping whole cans of mace on you. 1 can or 2 cans, and then they'll log it in the book as, oh, he resisted, so we had to use force. We had to use bear hug type tactics. We had to use mechanical restraints to restrain him because 20 officers couldn't stop one guy. Then you got Rodney Kings everywhere.
Why do you think mace is such an item that they use excessively? Because I remember when I was going over the beating that Christopher Keeles experienced, they maced him tremendously. Like, what is it about mace, or is that the officers only have a few tools at their disposal to use?
So I was a victim to the mace many times. They used 2 cans of mace on me one time after they set me up. They use that so they can blind you and you won't be able to report the things that you saw. That's a different sadistical tactic they use. But me, when that happened to me at Marcy, when I was beat up and they maced me and I was blinded, I knew their voices. I memorized their voices. I matched the voices to the names. I actually have a claim against 2 of them for beating me up. So that's like a horrible tactic they use. They mace you down until you can't see, until you can't breathe, until you start begging. And then they love it when you beg. For some reason, while I was working in there, the more you beg, the more brutally they beat you. So I made it one of my life's goals while I was in there to create and build a new agency of people that can understand the law. I sat there and went from Monday to Sunday and taught people how to write briefs, how to file motions, how to create legal actions, how to solve these problems administratively. And if that didn't work, how to do civil remedies. Every day I was in law library, every single day, to the point where they started watching my mail. And they was like, oh, we see you got a civil claim coming in. Oh, we see you got administrative appeal. Oh, we see a whole bunch of people coming down there. We probably set you up one day because we think you are selling drugs down there. That's how many people started coming down there, because now they figured out a way to fight back. The pen is mightier than a sword was really a thing now, and they feared that. And they used to tell me, we can't wait to get you out of this facility. When do you go home? You're a threat to us.
By the way, just a quick pause for everyone. If you haven't already, please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So, Sean, I want to go back real quick to something you said. You said the correctional officer who you see in the Robert Brooks video put a rag down Robert Brooks' mouth, who's Anthony Farina. You interacted with him, right? Aside from Anthony Farina, are there any other officers involved in the Robert Brooks murder that you interacted with or knew or personally while you were there?
The other sergeant used to come to law library all the time, and he used to snoop around and try to see what I was doing. But he was mainly friendly with my boss, Miss Main. The other officers, I would see them around, and some of them worked in the yard, some of them worked driving, some of them worked in dorms, or some of them were just rovers. They would just walk around the facility. But it was one there that I knew. I think his name was Fisher or Early, but they were a duo. It was Fisher and Early. They were the 2 ones that used to stake out the dorms and bust into the dorms in the middle of the night at 1 in the morning, and they will have their flashlights on. And if you were outside of your bed using the bathroom, they would automatically kidnap you in the middle of the night and bring you down to the infirmary and strip frisk you for no reason. Everybody knew them. If you go to Marcy and you ask anybody about Fisher and Early, they're gonna say those guys are creeps. They call them the creeps because they come in 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and you have a lot of old people that have medical problems and they need their medication, or they weren't able to take their medication and they got to go use the bathroom. They can't hold their bladder, and they would tell people, once these lights go out at 11 p.m., or if it's a late night, once these lights go out at 1 p.m., it's only 2 to the bathroom. And if an older guy might have skipped the line because he couldn't hold his bladder and he didn't want to pee on himself or, defecate on himself, they would kidnap him and they would torture him between the doors until he doodled himself, and then take him out, put him in the vans, and then we won't see him until the next morning. He's coming back with his boxers soiled and some slippers, some infirmary slippers, or we call them the box shoes. The box shoes they're like worse than Converses. They're below Converses. They're like 5-cent Chinese shoes that they make overseas. Things that you won't ever see in any store. That's what we call them. And then they have some that's like it feels like tissue. You stepping into the the brown part of the tissue. That's what it feels like you're working with those. And then when they beat you up and take you down there, the nurses, what they do is before they used to give you an ice pack and a Tylenol. Now I don't know what happened to the ice packs. They just give you 5 milligram Tylenol or ibuprofen or 10 milligram and tell you to go about your day. They were all hand in hand. They know what's going on. Nurse Matos, Nurse Green, they're well known to everybody. They would physically put their hands on people too and laugh about it after. Laugh about it. Like, I had a bad day. I'm so glad that this guy came down today.
Yeah. So I think now it's really a perfect time to segue into the nursing staff. So there's one thing I do want to say is that if there's anyone out there in the chat now, if you're a nurse, you're a medical professional, if you want to come on at the end of the stream and just give your input on the nurses, I would greatly appreciate that. So, but I do want to shift the focus now to the nurses involved in the Robert Brooks homicide. So, but the thing I'd like to do, Sean, is show you a comment that was made on the video from January 23rd. This comment was actually made a couple days ago. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen. I'm going to read it to everyone, and then I want to hear your input on it. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure.
Okay. So here's the comment that was made. Quote, everyone lay off on the nurses. Most of us have no inside knowledge, being that we aren't investigators nor taking part in the investigation. Probably they may have beaten the state to the punch. Perhaps the investigation was launched and the discovery of the camera body cam capturing the event was collateral. Anyone ever think of that? Anyone that has done docs nursing, I knew a couple of them, each have said COs rule the roost. They left their jobs because they said in New York State prisons, the culture is security, and the orders of the correction officers takes precedence over nursing decisions. Both nurses whom I used to know, they are now since retired and live out of state and have said they were fearful of half of the officers in that facility. Sean,
Okay.
what do you think about this?
You can leave it up. I want to be able to break it down to you. So the first thing I want to comment on is this guy having a bias towards the nurses. He's biased and for the nurses. I understand that. He might have been a guy that's currently a nurse or probably dating one of the nurses. So that's a bias alone. And yes, the correction officers do have safety and security protocols that they have to follow, but it's still wrong because the nurses have an oath that they sign up for, just like the correction officers, just like a judge or a district attorney. They take an oath of office. They are mandated court reporters. So if they see any form of abuse or brutality, they're supposed to report that. But like he said, they are now since retired. So the money was sweeter than the abuse, right? Right? The
Mm.
money overrided their fear. You telling me you stayed in a place of fear for 25 years?
Wow.
25 years you were getting paid to do a job to help serve and protect people, and you didn't report it? No, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of the nurses there date the officers. So that's another thing. So you can't sit there and say, I'm going to defend somebody that sat there for 25 years. I sat there for 2 years and I feel compelled to report this. I
Mm.
feel compelled to put myself out there and put my life on the line and my freedom on the line to report this and get on these shows and these podcasts and talk about it. And you tell me for 25 years you said nothing? That's a shame. That's a shame. They should be arrested too. They should be booked and processed for murder and everything too. That's a shame. That's a
Wow.
shame. And then yes,
So,
we do have a rule of law. We do have due process. There should be due process. Of course, there should be investigation, right? Investigate the same nurses that signed off on a lot of these abuses and said no injury sustained. But I won't sit there and bash every single nurse in corrections because not all of them are evil. You had some that saved my life when they maced me and were torturing me in that same infirmary. You had 2 nurses that said, I know him. He doesn't cause any problems. He comes here and he does his job. For the past year, he's been here. They saved my life. And it wasn't Matos and it wasn't Green, I'll tell you that, because they take
mm,
part in ass whoopings. And that's what it is. And it's not even ass whoopings, it's far beyond that. And that's why I compared it to a Nazi death camp, because the things that they did in there it was wrong. It was shameful. And it's very disturbing for him to try to defend that.
wow. So there was a toward the end of this comment, this individual said that at the last sentence, they were fearful of half the officers in that facility. So what do you think of this comment about these nurses being in fear of the officers and going along to get along?
So some of the officers already knew that they had qualified immunity, which meant they had free reign. It's like getting a pass from the president to murder people, to brutalize people, and telling people to their face, I will kill you and nothing will happen. Yes, so I get it. If you get to see somebody pummel people on a daily basis, I would be fearful too. But
Yeah.
but while I was living there, I had the balls, excuse my language, to tell them to their face that I don't fear you. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to report this. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to sit here and be a victim about it. So I had to put my cape on. I had to become a hero. I had to be able to take my punches, take my good days and my bad days. And the bad
Mm,
days always outweighed the good days in corrections. You had some
yeah.
officers that used to say, I really commend what you're doing because we have to get rid of these guys. But at the same time, you are taking that salary. You are staying here for all these years and you're allowing it to happen too. And I used to
Yeah.
tell them the day is going to come where accountability is going to happen. It's going to be transparent and you're going to regret not being a mandated reporter like you were supposed to do.
Mhm.
And now look,
We actually have a comment here that I thought was appropriate. Dwayne said, "Those nurses were not scared. They were laughing at Robert Brooks being beat."
yeah, yeah, I saw the video. I saw it. I saw it.
Mm,
That's the culture. So these officers become friends with these nurses, and then it becomes a culture of cover ups. So now, when somebody gets beat up by officer, the first thing they say is, "Oh, it was a one-on-one fight with an unknown inmate."
mm,
So you telling me this guy beat himself up, or this person got away with an officer that supervises the dorm that watches everybody? Some nobody just knows who done it. Nobody know who did it.
Wow.
He just punched himself in the face. He has lacerations on his face from somebody's knuckles, punching him several times in his face. But when he left the dorm, he didn't have any injuries. As soon as he reports to his tier hearing, or as soon as he goes to get his medication, or as soon as he goes to eat his breakfast, he's coming back with bruises all over his face. Then he's given a year in the box because he spun off the wall. And then the nurse's report says no injury sustained or unknown inmate or refused for years.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on.
And then for me, the thing that is very harming is it's one thing to see these abuses and be scared, because it's possible you might have nurses who were scared. It's something else to actively cover up these abuses. And I think you mentioned before that they would write in these reports, these injuries came from a unknown, incarcerated person, and they knew people were getting beat and they saw it firsthand. Right, Sean? You said they would see these beatings occur in front of their
They
faces,
were partaking
and
in some of the beatings.
they would partake in them.
I
Okay, so if
seen, I visually saw this. I visually
yeah,
saw this with my own eyes.
yeah. So with you saying that they partook in some of the abuses, I want to go back to the freelance article where you said this, and you were quoting Patricia Matos. You said that she said when patients came in, suck it up and be a man. And then you also said something that was pretty surprising. You said that she also physically assaulted patients
Yes,
at the infirmary. So you're
yes,
saying that Patricia Matos, RN,
yes,
physically
yes,
assaulted
yes,
patients.
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Can you talk to
Physically,
us about that?
closed fist punches to the face. When people were handcuffed or maced, she would punch them in the face. She said, "This guy is always an asshole. He comes to get to his medication." Because sometimes she would serve the medication in the windows. They have these little glass windows, and people line up on the line outside of the infirmary. And another thing I forgot to mention was sometimes they didn't want to work. So when they had to come in and do certain evaluations, or they had to give out certain special kinds of medication, they would say, "Everybody refuse. Today is not the day. I don't feel like working today. Refuse this medication, refuse this exam, or refuse whatever physical she had to do." And if they didn't refuse, she would tell the officer, "This guy's an asshole, write him a ticket." Or, "This guy, today's his day." And they would team up and whoop his ass. Excuse my language, but for real, this
Yeah.
is real. This is real. And it's really disturbing
Wow.
because now you not only have to fear the people that are supposed to protect you, you also fear the people that are supposed to provide help and a service and take a oath to report this type of abuse. So how would you feel if your grandmother is in a nursing home and people are being abused there and being beat on by the same people that's supposed to provide their medication? So now it makes you wonder, is this person giving out the proper dosage of medication, or is this person giving me poison to kill me? You don't know what the person's mindset is. So now you're fostering a culture of brutality and poison. This is a registered nurse,
Yeah.
and you're in a place where you don't have any kind of rights besides what they offer you, and that's the bare minimum. And then you're in their custody, so they have to, by law, protect you and provide for you these small services. And it's below bare minimum. It's below bare minimum. All they really do is give you insulin, ibuprofen, Tylenol, and probably catheters, from what I've seen. That's it. I haven't seen
Wow.
anything else. I haven't seen anything. Everybody that comes there says, "I'm in the infirmary. This is the house of horrors. I hate it here. I don't know what
Wow.
they put me on the call out list for."
So how often did you encounter people being beaten in that infirmary? Was it on a daily basis? Was this once a week? I mean, how widespread were these abuses that you saw?
Realistically, all the time, bro. All the time. It's sometimes you have a guy that's in the quarantine room for days. For days. And that's why I compared it to that. For days, you might have a guy that's being beat on for days because he's the herb for the week. He's the herb. Or you might have a group of people that might have been the herbs. Or a guy might have gotten into an argument with another guy, and the officer decided to pull his pin. And the COs that were working that day were watching the game like a Bills game. They loved the Bills. So if the Bills lost that day or the Bills were losing, and an officer pulled his alarm and they had to respond while they were watching the Bills game, you were in for the ride of your life, literally. And you're handcuffed the whole time. So you can't even defend yourself. That makes it 30 times worse. Do you know how traumatizing that is to receive blows to your face and your testicles and your ribs, and there's no way to defend yourself? You know the psychological trauma that leaves on you? And then you're maced or you're blind and you can't defend yourself? That's worse than torture. That's why I compared it to a Nazi death camp.
Wow. Also in that same article, you was quoted as calling Patricia Matos the queen of cover-ups.
Yes.
Can you talk to us more about why you said that?
Because she literally would forge all of the documents for the officers. She would tell them what to write, how to write it, and put the times, the dates, and have the signatures already set up. And then she will call the sergeants or the lieutenants that they needed to sign off on these documents. And it's called misbehavior reports. So she had everything already lined up. And she's been doing it for so long that she already knew the protocol. Hold on, don't hit him that way. Don't hit him that part. Or don't choke him like that. Do it this way so you won't kill him. We don't need another incident on our hands. These are the things that come out of her mouth. That's disgusting.
Wow.
That is disgusting. And for me to sit there and I can't do anything about it. And it's not a black and white thing. It's not even a race thing. It's everybody as a whole. Everybody. Puerto Rican, black, Chinese, Jewish, white, gay, lesbian, straight. It's everybody. Whatever you identify as, they're going to torture you and brutalize you. And that's what made it even more stronger when I reported to Canny, because you had every single race and religion reporting this. If it was just a black thing, we wouldn't even be talking right now. It wouldn't even be a report.
Yeah.
So I'm very unbiased with that.
And when you said that it was reported to Canny, that's the Correctional Association of New York.
Yes.
And maybe could you talk to us about that relationship between Canny and Marcy, because I heard there was some sort of they came in and spoke to those people incarcerated and did a study or had questionnaires. Could you maybe speak on that?
That was the happiest day of my life. That was the happiest day of my life. You don't know how many nights I sat in law library and I went through all of the files. I used to get on the phone and call my brother and ask him for different watchdog groups that can help. We wrote the governor, we wrote the mayor, we wrote courts, state, federal, everywhere, every single different borough, every up and down New York State. We wrote everybody. Some of the people didn't respond. Some of the letters just went missing. Some of the letters were returned to sender and it were open. Sometimes we even had officers come to us and tell us, we intercepted your letter. If you send anything out like that again, we're going to kill you. I got that a lot. So
they would intercept mail of complaints.
That was huge. That's huge in these facilities. Intercepting the mail is huge. That's probably one of the biggest corrupt things that I've ever saw. And that's one thing I really want to advocate too. We need an outside source to screen the mail as well. And I've seen something that they tried to pull by saying, hey, the mail, there's a lot of drugs being brought in through the mail. There's a lot of drugs being brought in by your offices. But nobody wants to talk about that. Everything is a cover up. Everything is a scheme. Everything is a red herring. So whatever you see being put out there by the media, is to cover up something underneath that. It's always an underlying cause under that.
Yeah.
So,
there is one thing that I did heard was that Kathy Hochul was going to utilize a third party company to screen the mail. So I did hear about that. I don't know whether that's going to be implemented or not, but that could be beneficial to both the COs and to the those incarcerated.
So one thing I'll tell you is this, right? When it comes to mail, you have a certain deadline with the courts to send out your documents. If you don't reach that court mandated deadline, then you could lose your case. So that's a very, very sensitive topic right
Mm,
there. If she doesn't get that right, that's going to be a huge lawsuit on her part, because a lot of people have sensitive documentations. A lot of people are trying to get their time overturned or trying to get their parole returned to them. A lot of other different things, family court, family members dying, or wills, or whatever you got going on with your court procedures,
yeah.
right? So if this third party organization is reviewing the mail and they don't do a good job with it, then you're going to have a lot of deadlines missed. And then
Yeah.
with the officers here already, they might hold on to your mail and say, "Oh, we suspect that there's fentanyl in this mail," and they'll just take your mail and destroy it. And now the courts are writing you like, "Hey, you missed the deadline," and you're like, "What do you mean? I never got any documents." They're like, "We sent documents at this date and time," and the next you know, you file a FOIA request, which takes about 2 weeks, and you realize somebody forged my signature. I never received this. And if you file a grievance, you're going to be just like a guy that I helped get his misbehavior report overturned. He filed a grievance and said, his name is Andre Adams, by the way. He filed a report to the Attorney General, Letitia James, after he exhausted all his administrative remedies, saying, "I was set up." And then they were like, "Listen, sign off saying that you don't want to proceed with this, or we're going to beat you up and kill you." And he said no. So they beat him up, but they didn't remove him from the facility. He came directly to the library to meet. And he said, "Look at this. I have almost 285 days on loss of rec due to a faulty misbehavior report or a ticket, whatever you want to call it." And I said, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to help you out." So I said, "Tell me the situation." He said, "They called me down to the package room, and they said I received the package. I received a 35-pound package from my family, but it turned out to be a 25-pound package with nothing that my family sent me. And I have a list." And he printed out the list that his family sent them. And he said they sent me a whole bunch of different items that wasn't mine. So they ended up telling him, "Listen, we took a piece out of everybody's package and gave it to you to remedy this. Do you want this?" He said, "Hell no, I don't want this." They said, "All right, sign it and just go." So he signed it. He filed the grievance. They made him sign for the first package and sign for the second package. So what they were supposed to do was they were supposed to destroy the package, but before they destroyed it, they were supposed to test it for fentanyl. They have a procedure for that. So I wrote and I requested through FOIL, "Where is this procedure of you testing for fentanyl in his package?" They said, "Oh, we never tested, we just destroyed it." I said, "So you broke protocol then?" I said, "All right, let me FOIL the logbook." I forward the logbook. I said, "Hold on. How is there fentanyl in the first package, but you gave him a second package? That doesn't make any sense." He signed for 2 packages in one day. This is a setup. Either this is a setup or this is an error. And then they were like, "Listen, he's still guilty." They found him guilty and they threatened him. It was lieutenant and it was 2 COs. And one of them was Farina, the same one that stuffed the rag in Robert Brooks's mouth. Right?
Wow.
Yep. So I ended up
Yeah.
writing that down and I appealed it to the courts. And the Attorney General got it. And I know her eyes probably popped out of her head. She got the dates and times and the names and the story added up and it made sense. So we got an administrative appeal reversed in our favor.
Mm.
And from
And,
there,
and I'm sure that's rare that happens, that
rare,
these things get reversed.
it doesn't exist.
Mm.
It's like a rare Pokemon that you can never find. No,
Wow. Wow. You know what? I want to go back to the article, the JV Nicholas freelance news article, and there was a reference in there to one of the nurses, specifically Kyle Deschnall, right?
yeah,
And there's one thing that stuck out for me, for those of you who watched the Robert Brooks murder on camera at the end, when you see attempts to revive Robert Brooks, and you see Kyle Deschnore walking over and then turning away, and he has this face of fright, I call it, like this face of, oh shit, some shit happened here, and he knows that they died. I think they all knew he passed away there. Have you had any dealings with Kyle Deschnore? And if
yeah.
so, could you talk to us about that?
So I remember when Kyle Dashnell first started working, he just looked like a young boy trying to find a job. And I was like, all right, cool. But I didn't say anything to him. And then Nurse Matos actually introduced me to him. She's like, yeah, we got a new guy named Kyle. He's gonna be working with us, so don't be surprised. I was like, all right, cool. I didn't pay any mind. I just did what I usually did. Came in with the mop, came in with the broom, and just kept my head down and cleaned up and get prepared to leave, you know? But some days I used to smoke cigarettes. So I will go on smoke breaks. And that was my coping mechanism to deal with the stress. I didn't have any therapist. There was no clinician to speak to, anything like that. So I ended up picking up that habit. I quit now though, thank God. But I would go out there and smoke probably 1 or 2 cigarettes. And he ended up coming out there sometimes. And then sometimes he'd just sit there quiet and not say anything. I wasn't going to say anything to you. I didn't know if you were the type of person to be indulged with the beatings. So I just kept quiet until one day he just said to me, he was like, you know, I just don't get it. I don't get what goes on in here. Why do they do that? And I just looked at him and I didn't say anything. And he was like, you know what I mean? And I just looked at him. He's like, how do they get away with these beatings? And I was just like, you know, and he kind of was voicing his opinion to me. But me being in prison for so long, I already know. Don't say anything that can be used against you, you know? And it's a little traumatizing having to sit there and just like, and that was my go-to. Just don't say anything. Just, it was kind of more eyebrows, like, and nodding. Just like how you're doing now. It was more like, you know what I want to say. You know what I want to say to you. So from there, that was routine. We would come out there, and then after probably about 2 months, we started conversating and we started having realistic conversations. And then from there, he used to just talk to me about some of the abuses, and I was like, damn, this guy has common sense. He sees the culture here, and it's wrong. And then he said it too. He said, Matos is a real bitch. And I just smiled. I'm like, I get it. You know? So when I seen his face in the video, and I seen the smiling, but it wasn't a smile in a joking way. It was a smile of fear. Because some people smile and laugh in fear.
That's true. That's very true.
That's a tactic to cope. That's a coping mechanism. But really on the inside, you're screaming. And then I seen him do the sternum rub. That's like a CPR thing to save a life. And then before you do mouth to mouth. And once he realized the sternum rub was useless, that was a fear of fright. That's total oblivion. You know that there's no turning back from here. They went too far that time. He thought in his head, this is the norm where they're just going to beat him real bad and probably drag him into the quarantine room and let him sit there for weeks and beat him up from now and then. He didn't think that they were going to kill him because that was the normal there. That was the culture there, right? That shocked his conscience. That blew his mind. He wasn't expecting that because this was so normal. They knew when to stop. They knew just the amount of pressure to put on him. They knew just the amount of chokeholds to use, right? Yeah. Until things went left. And that's when he said, damn, it's over. Today's the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. But by the way, everyone, don't forget to like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And, one very important thing, I have to thank you, Sean, for coming on and being very giving of your time. I really appreciate it. It's not easy coming on and just talking about your experience to the world and talking about these atrocities, talking about these things that are obviously very traumatic, because while you're talking about it, I see those emotions in you. And I mean, I can't even imagine going through a quarter of the stuff that you've gone through and not having that anger and not wanting revenge. I mean, I would think most people that come out of Marcy or any other facility have this intense anger and hatred. How do you deal with that?
So I kind of came to terms with it, and I found inner peace because I don't want to be a person that fosters that kind of hate. I don't want to be a person to return that hate. I'm looking for accountability. I want to bring full transparency to this, and I want to end qualified immunity so they can have their day in court. In an actual court of law, not the the bullshit that they're trying to peddle as a parole board or a time allowance committee, these things, these mock interviews that they have to make it look like something is happening. I want an actual judge and jury of our peers to prosecute these people, not that flunky that they put on the case because Letitia James stepped down. Everybody knows this guy's history as a guy that's a fixer. Come on,
Yeah.
let's have a real judge and jury in accordance with the Constitution. Not this sideshow that they're trying to put up and let these guys walk. I don't want to see these guys walk because then it's going to go back to the same thing that it has been for the past who knows how long. Who knows how long this has been going on. And then you want me to be rehabilitated, right? I can't come home and say, I saw this for the past 2-3 years and I'm rehabilitated. No, that's not rehabilitation, man. And that's one thing that I really came to understand. My life's goal is to bring about that change and get rid of this hate. You know, bring a whole new agency.
Wow. I think there was one thing you said that was powerful last week that a lot of people agree about. You had mentioned, and I think I made a smaller video about it, us talking about OSI and getting rid of OSI and having an outside, neutral third party investigate these complaints of abuse. I think that needs to happen ASAP.
I believe that should be something that's immediate.
Yeah.
You need somebody to talk to. If you're a person that's contemplating suicide and you have nobody to go to, or you don't have a medical professional that you can speak to, which these people are supposed to be, which is sad. And if you do say I'm feeling suicidal, the first thing they're going to do is laugh in your face and put you in a turtle suit and lock you away in a dark room. Are you kidding me? That's not a part of the medical profession. Do you have a licensed social worker? Do you have anybody to give therapy, the proper treatment? And you expect people to come home after that? After you just pilled them down, pilled them to death, and then lock them in these dark rooms and say, yeah, send them back into society. Expect them to get a job. Expect them to be a neighbor to somebody. Come on. That doesn't make any sense.
No. Okay. For those of you out there, Sean is available to take any questions. So I'm gonna post up the link again for anyone who wants to come on and ask Sean a question. By all means, feel free to click on the link. The only thing I say is you have to be able to share your camera so we see your face. You also can't have any loud music in the background. So if you want to come up and ask Sean a question, the link is in the chat now. You can feel free to come on. Also, I'd love to hear from any nursing professionals out there. If you want to come on and talk to us about your opinions in terms of what happened in the Robert Brooks homicide, in terms of what's happening in these infirmaries throughout New York State Department of Corrections, because this is not only happening just at Marcy, it's not only happening at Fishkill, it's happening at a lot of the facilities throughout New York State. Every facility has their own beat up squad. Every facility has their own Patricia Machos, their own queen of cover-ups that are actively covering up these abuses. So this needs to stop all around. So again, I posted the link. I think I'll give people a couple minutes to come on. If not, I think we'll start to close, Sean, and end the stream. So, Sean, is there anything else you want to let the people know about Marcy? Is there anything that you wanted me to ask you that I did not ask you?
No, I think that's pretty much well covered. I just wanted to thank you for having me here. And another person that really shed a light on things that were going on and was really a true hero was Dep DeBejan before he retired. So Dep DeBejan at Marcy, he was the I think he was a deputy superintendent. He was the only person that actually sat there and took on the complaints within the facility. When I was an inmate liaison co-chair. So I would go and sit in front of the superintendents, the deps, the lieutenants, and all the other people that kind of had a superior role or seniority within the facility. And they would brush off any complaints that we had, any kind of complaint or voice we tried to share with them. They would just brush it off. But him, he would stop after everything is done and pull us all to the side and sit down with us and let us voice our complaints to him. And he would actually go out his way to get it done. And he would make sure Albany was notified about it. And I really, really appreciated his compassion for us. Wow. Without him, I don't think I would be here today, because I wouldn't have this voice, and he would never have allowed them to put their hands on me. So I really thank him, and I commend him for being brave and going against the system. And I really think it was because he's retiring and he finally was able to take his show on the road, but he was brave enough to do that. Unlike those two nurses that the guy in the earlier show were talking about, that just took the money and ran with it and didn't even voice their opinion. They didn't file a complaint or anything. So I really commend him.
No. Oh, you know what? There is something that I forgot to ask you. Do you think Patricia Matos, Kyle Deschnaw, and then you had a third nurse who was an outside consultant they hired? Do you think those three, or one of them, or two of them, should be charged with something on it criminally? Do you think they should be charges?
So I believe all three of them should be charged. The same way that if gang assault took place in the streets, right? And you had a bystander watching and didn't call 911 or didn't try to seek out any form of assistance or help, and they would be booked and processed in any middle class or low income community, right? They would be booked and processed, and they would have to go through the same procedure, and then they would be asked what happened. They would have to present a statement. And if they didn't present a statement, guess what? They're going to prison, or they're going to Rikers Island if you're from New York City, or you're going to whatever county jail until you come forward and say what happened, or you'll be sentenced and you have to go upstate because you didn't want to testify and say what happened, right? So these individuals have to say exactly what happened. They have to go through the process like anybody else. It's a constitutional right. By law, they have to go through the laws just like anybody else. If you're a law-abiding citizen, if you're a court-mandated reporter, if you're a teacher, doctor, CO, whatever, nobody's above the law. Nobody's above the law. I'm not above the law. If people beat somebody half to death and killed them in front of me, and the cops came and there was a dead body, and I was in the area, guess what? You know what's going to happen to me, right? I'm going to jail. I'm going to the precinct to be interviewed, and they're going to take my statement down and say, what happened? And if I say no comment, guess what? I'm being booked and processed right with them. I'm going to be a co-defendant in that case, and I'm going to have to see the bookings for 3 days, eating cheese, cold, moldy cheese and milk. And I'm going to have to wait for 3 to 4 days to see a judge. And that judge is going to say remand status. And I'm going to be on Rikers Island for about 1.5 years until they figure out what happened. And I'm going to get a legal aid. I'm not going to have one of the best attorneys in the state represent me. I'm going to have a legal flunky try to help me that doesn't care about me. Doesn't care what happens to me. He's just going to look at me and pull out a folder that's not even my name. It's going to be somebody that's not even me. And he's going to say, hey, John. I'm going to say, that's not me. I'm not John. I'm Sean. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll go in front of the judge, and he's gonna put remand status, and we'll figure it out next court date. And then when they finally let me go and they realize what happened, guess what? That's time out of my life that I could never get back. They have to feel that too. They have to feel that.
Yeah. I think also they have a big responsibility in terms of their licensing, in terms of doing no harm, and also if they've engaged in falsifying documentation, that's a crime, because what's occurring in these infirmaries and in these facilities are crimes. It doesn't matter if you perpetrate that to anybody on the streets of Manhattan or whether you do it inside a correctional facility. If you beat somebody, that's a criminal act. It's a criminal act. And if you attempt to cover it up, that's conspiracy as well. So, in that respect, these nurses, if they're covering this up actively, they need to be arrested. They need to be incarcerated themselves.
You just took the words out of my mouth. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that,
Yeah.
and sometimes it made me feel like I was the crazy one because it's like, hold on, there's rules and laws and regulations put into place, but there's a double standard. And when we come out and we put our lives on the line and report this, the course turns around and says they have qualified immunity. You're allowed to do this with full discretion on how to go about bringing about the consequences. And then you know what happens? They just take them from one facility and put them in another
Mhm.
facility and forget it all happened and just replace one person with another person that does the same exact thing. They say, oh, it's time to swap you two. You go over here and keep doing what you were doing, and you go over here. That's not justice.
No.
That's a mockery of the courts. They're wiping their ass with the Constitution.
No.
Where's the justice in that? There would be a uproar in society if one of us did something horrible or horrendous, right? And the next thing you know, they just pick me up and put me in another part of New York. And they said, "Don't worry about it. We put him in another part of New York. He killed somebody over here, but we're just gonna put him in Rochester, New York. Don't worry about it. And when I do it again in Rochester, New York, don't worry about it. We'll just move him to Utica, and then pick me up again and move me to Syracuse. That's not justice. It's not justice.
No.
And
No.
then give me a bigger salary and make me a sergeant after that. And then I continue. Now I
Yep.
supervise people and make them do the same thing I did. Then I keep rising up, lieutenant, and I get my pension. And then I hire my kids to do the same thing. And then people see that like,
Yeah.
oh, hold on, this guy is rising up in the ranks. He just murdered somebody. He's a lieutenant now. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We have Al who just wrote, "We are in a crisis." Yeah. Okay. All right, Sean, I want to thank you for your time again. For everyone who's been on, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for caring. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you can just share, just continue to share. Share this with your associates and your friends because a lot of people they're oblivious to what's happening. We have atrocities occurring in correctional facilities, and it seems like nobody cares. So please share these videos. I don't care if you share somebody else's video, that's fine. There are a bunch of other creators producing this kind of content, but the word has to get out there that there are abuses occurring. So let's please share this, get the word out so that we can put a stop to this. And let's put pressure on our elected officials and our DAs. Our DAs they've been hiding. They've been allowing this shit to happen for many, many years and not prosecuting. That has to end. So, Sean, thanks again. I will see you again soon, hopefully, God willing. For everyone, take care. God bless, and see you next time.
And back to
Peace.
green now. Thank you.
Back to green now.